Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld's senior editor, Keith Raynor. And Keith, this is a special episode.
It indeed is. It indeed is. Big number episode.
Episode number 400. 400, which Keith has been tracking this for a while. We've had the date circled on the calendar, if you will. And, you know, we call it a weekly radio show. There were times in the past where we didn't have a show every week. Over the past couple of years, we really have had a show pretty much every single week. And so, you know, you can do the math. 400 episodes, 52 weeks a year. The show has been on the air for more than 8 years at this point, but, you know, approximately 8 years worth of weekly episodes, which is, you know, pretty amazing. And it's been quite the ride. And we've got a really fun kind of opportunity to look back over almost 10 years of Deep Look. We'll have our 10-year anniversary episode later this year. But, you know, for episode number 400, we thought it'd be fun to kind of take a look back at all of the, you know, shows in the past and even some hosts of the past. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Before we talk Deep Look history, we got to talk about PUL Championship Weekend, Keith. Medellin, Revo Pro, Revolution, dominant form this weekend. And they take down both Raleigh and DC in consecutive games and look pretty dominant doing so. They crushed Raleigh in the semifinals and then opened up a big lead early on DC, from which the Shadow were never able to claw back. They win that game 17-15, but really it wasn't that close. They had a 3-4 break lead most of the game. They actually went down a break early on the first point of the game, went down 1-0. Then they opened up a 4-1 lead. DC got back to 4-3, and then Revo pulled away to 8-3, and that was basically the game. This team is just clearly the class of the PUL, and, you know, would be a national, you know, a USAU club national championship contender 100%. If they played in the USAU series, Keith.
Undefeated, never lost, baby. Have never taken an L in PUL history. Have won every title the league's ever had. It's the Revolution Ultimate League, really, at this point. I mean, there was a tweet about how there should be more kind of like hot takes, I feel like, around the league. And, you know, if we want a hot take, like, is Revo bad for the league? Are they ruining the game of Ultimate? Are they ruining the Premier Ultimate League? This utter dominance. You know, we could have that conversation. We could be talking about should Manu Cardenas should we be talking about her as the GOAT? Is she the future GOAT? You know, move over Miranda Roth. We got a GOAT on our hands. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what's happening right now. She was fantastic for Revo during this run and certainly during their playoff performance. I mean, honestly, DC and Raleigh are good, and they made them look not so good. You know, particularly I think Raleigh did not put forth their best effort. I'm sure they're frustrated by having 2 shots at Revo and not really feel like they got their feet on the ground. But that's the impact that Revo can have on a team. And while 17-15 like kind of looks close on paper, and DC didn't get blown out in the way we've seen most other teams, it never really quite felt like they were going to get one over on Revo after the first like couple minutes. You know, they open with the break. It's like 4-3. You know, you're like, okay, maybe we're in. Maybe this is the game we've been waiting for. And Revo pulls away and then just kind of keeps him at arm's length the rest of the way.
The point I'm about to make is not totally fair, but if we remember back to the last time we saw DC Scandal on the field, which I guess was 2019, right? They had a tremendous defense and a bad offensive line. Now, the Shadows' offensive line was not bad, but it was the weak link in this game against an elite opponent. And the defense actually did a decent job against Revo. They got breaks. They opened with a break. They got breaks in the middle of the game. They got a break late in the game to get back within 2, basically in garbage time. But like the defense, did its job to some extent. The O-line had no answers really for the Revo defense. Now they settled in more a little bit later in the game, but again, like it was kind of out of hand a couple minutes into the fourth quarter. And I think ultimately you just have to credit Revo's defense because they played excellent reset defense and they took away spaces effectively downfield, like to start to kind of catalyze the run early in the game that extended it to a big lead at 8-3. They got essentially a coverage sack where there was just a stall 9.5, like no look throw upfield that had no chance. Ended up coming back as a stall, easy break for Revo. And like that was just emblematic of the game. Revo's defense, very physical, very fast, very effective. I think that to me, the biggest thing I'm thinking about right now is what does this tell us about what we're going to see from Colombia at the World Games in just a few weeks? Obviously, their female matching players are going to be extremely effective, maybe even better than we saw them 4 years ago when, of course, they beat the U.S. in pool play. So I'm very impressed with Revo. Like I said on the show last week when I picked them to win the title, or 2 weeks ago now, I should never have doubted them. Like this is still an elite club team playing, in this kind of hybrid pro club model, which is not really what we see from these other teams, which probably puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage given the continuity that Revo gets to have, along with obviously the tremendous talent and depth.
That's actually the thing that I think I came away, realizing I wasn't accounting for, was that in a lot of ways, I mean, this is where Revo's at. Like they looked like they're in fine form because they are. I mean, they are prepping as a club team. They're prepping at all these players who are going to be playing in the World Games. They have World Ultimate Clubs coming up. Like this is mostly the same unit. Like, they had Leanne Hoffman out there for this game. And that obviously augments your ability. It's going to push your ceiling higher. But for the most part, I mean, these are players who've been playing together for a long time, and this is what they do, and they do it together. While, for a lot of these other players, they're coming off of time off, or they're joining new groups of players or players that they're not going to be playing with in the club season. Like it to me, it really showed that Revo was more cohesive and better prepared for the opposition. They did play a tremendous defensive game. They got way too many opportunities from like midfield. I feel like, I think that's where DC's offense really let them down, was giving up a lot of opportunities where it just wasn't a lot of yardage for Revo to work. Lets them, kind of go into that small ball game that they do so well. They mixed it up. They threw some matchup. They threw some zone. Like they did a little bit of everything, and they did it well. But DC just not able to maintain possession, particularly during those first half runs. Going down, it looked like they might get run out of the gym for a second there. They have like a 3-goal run at the end of the first half to bring it back within 3. But for a second, they're looking at like down 12-6 like that. That's on your way to a blowout. So that credit to their D-line for showing a lot of fight and not quitting on a game that I think could have been easy to feel beaten in by a fantastic opponent. So that they really showed some grit, and that's great for DC. I think they had a great season. And they kind of backed up their bona fides. I don't know if people were necessarily doubting them, although people had questions about their seeding, which is based on what they've done, not what they could do. So that's understandable, but I think they looked like a very good team, a competitive team, but just Revo's on another level.
Midwest representative Indy got absolutely obliterated by DC. No surprise there. DC covered the spread and everything, Keith.
And like twice over.
I don't know what the move is. I think they maybe need to rethink the divisions a little bit. I mean, I understand you need to focus on travel time and things like that, but when you have good teams getting left out of championship weekend, and you already have a team like Revo could play in the Midwest, why not? They've got to fly in anyway. Like put them in the division where, like, I don't know. I don't know if there's an easy answer. There were just clearly 3 teams that were way better than everybody else. And those 3 teams all made it to championship weekend. So I can't complain too much, but you have just completely non-competitive semifinal. That's no fun. Neutral site in Ohio for these games. I don't, as much as possible, I think that all of the pro leagues really need to try to put their championship weekends in places where a home team is going to be playing. And I know that that's like sort of competitively unfair in some ways, but like you have to balance that against the fan, experience and like getting people to come and buy tickets. I mean, there was like nobody in the stands for the finals, Keith.
Well, you think back to 2019, when PUL guaranteed a spot for the home team. Like, do you think that
goes too far?
That's pendulum swing too far. Well, it's hard to schedule a championship weekend event.
We're putting it in DC, and who knows if DC is going to make the playoffs? And like, what a surprise, they make the playoffs.
But it's a risk, and it's difficult to schedule on the back end. I mean, you see like the AUDL is scheduling their championship weekend locations like a year in advance. Yeah. I think that there could be, honestly, like, especially in the PUL where the competitive field is already kind of wonky. I mean, you've got some teams that are really good. You've got some teams that have struggled to field a competitive squad for the duration of the league. So it's already a little wonky. Like, I actually don't mind. I mean, people took issue with the way that they handled competitive fairness this season. Screw it. Like, just give a bid to the home team. Like, at that point, who cares?
Yeah, I don't know. I care.
Would it have been significantly different if Columbus had been there instead of Indy or Milwaukee?
Well, no. I mean, no. But like, at the end of the day, you want the games to actually matter. Like, what's the point of having a season where Indy knows they have no chance to go to the playoffs? That doesn't make any sense to me. In this weekend's games, yeah, no, it wouldn't have mattered.
Hey, it doesn't stop the Detroit Mechanics from fielding a team.
Well, that's true. But not putting the championship weekend in the decrepit stadium in Detroit either. So, all right. Well, certainly exciting to see what Revo looked like. They came close at WCC back in 2018. They're going to be hungry for the win this year. But first, we got World Games. Back-to-back World Games, WCC, coming up in July. We got lots of international ultimate talk coming up on the show as we get ready for those events.
Do you think the Colombian male matching players like feel a lot of pressure? Are they like, wow, we have to show up, because if we do, we could win this thing.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just getting carried, and we're like, if we lose, it's going to be our fault.
They are getting carried. They are getting carried, and like that's okay. I think it happens, right? Like the fact is they need to do what they can to involve their women as much as possible, because that's just, and the way that it's going to work this year with the variation 4 and 3 and alternating polling, like I think that a lot of that stuff is to Colombia's advantage. So I'm excited to see what they look like. And it's not like their top male players are not very good. They are very good. They're just not going to be at the level of the players in Australia or US or Japan. But we'll see. We'll see. It's been a few years since we've seen these teams.
It really has. It really has.
5 years of development's a long time.
Yeah, and I saw some of the Colombian kind of like pro weekend that they did, and there were some players. So I think they're going to be competitive. I don't think it's a long branch that I'm going out on, but I think their male matching players could be better than people think.
I agree with that. Any final thoughts on the PUL season, Keith, as it comes to a close? It was tumultuous. Obviously, there were some real challenges, and I'm very curious how the league is going to approach the next season.
There's obviously a lot of things to work out. That's part of the nature of running a new sports league. But it just feels like the league isn't on it. It hasn't really gotten on its feet in some ways. After they probably were really hurt by having the pandemic after such a great pilot season, had a lot of momentum, and that kind of gets sapped away by the not just the pandemic, but other things that were arising around the league too. So a lot of stuff to do, and unfortunately, it's always going to be a resource game. But figuring that stuff out is kind of the league management's role, and they have some challenges ahead. I'm very curious to see what they do next, because there's a lot of different directions to go from here, because there's a lot of different levers that kind of have to be tweaked right now.
All right, let's talk a little club rosters. We're seeing club teams release their rosters, and it's an interesting year because you have some people who are playing with a team for WUCC, but then they're playing with a different team for the series. And so there's still a lot of things in flux, players playing on this roster and then that roster, because remember, there's a lot of flexibility for who you play with during the beginning of the season, which is a good thing, I think. So what roster has impressed you the most so far, Keith? Let me ask you that.
I mean, it's hard not to go with the stock answers, right? Which are Fury and Pony, basically. Like, wow, really, really exciting stuff. That the Juggernaut teams look really good again. That's kind of where we're at with those teams. But I mean, everybody's complaining about the way the roster announcements are coming out. It's totally fair. You probably should. Yep. It has been a weird, it's silly season out there for rosters. I don't know what else to say about it, including Pony's weirdo release that people had to like interpret for us to have like a text version in the metaverse. Yes.
You had to go walk around in the like art gallery in the metaverse,
which is a hysterical troll, but surely they could have put out a text version as well, right? Like we could have gotten both. Is that?
Yeah, I don't really understand. Like mixtape seems to have started this trend. I wrote about this in the mailbag. Mixtape seems to have started this trend of just like bizarro, like non-roster releases, and now other teams are like going that direction. Like Nemesis's was in Morse code. Like, why are we?
And they didn't even add Linda Morse.
Like, is this fun? Are we having a fun time with this? Like, I guess the teams have fun with it, but maybe I'm the no fun guy, but like, I just want to know who's on the roster. Like, please just like give me a really clear announcement about who your coaches are, who your captains are, who your new players are, who maybe even announce who's leaving the team. I want to give a special shout out to Furious George, who has been so professional about this over the years. They send an email with all of the information and a press release to Ultiworld and said, here's our roster, here's the information, Amazing. I wish more teams would do that. So yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we're going to do our best to, compile everything into actual rosters so that you can search them on Google and look at them. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about these actual teams and not just complain about their way of announcing them. Pony adding Antoine Davis, not a big surprise there. John Lithio will join the team this year. He's been playing with these players for a couple of years now on the Empire. Jeff Babbitt is back. Mike Drost is back. They add Saul Rushmeyer Bailey, who's also been playing with the Empire, and Daniel Mayland. Those are your additions. Leaving the team this year, a couple players get demoted to practice player status. Kevin Norton and Markian Kuzmowicz. Isaac Saul is leaving after WCC. Jack Hatchett is leaving after WCC, as is Michael Brenner. And Esteban Zuluaga will not be playing with the team this season. A lot of continuity here, Keith. We already know that they have a ton of, tremendous talent. I don't remember how many players made the kind of like the first cut for the World Games team, but we're talking about multiple World Games players, and Jimmy Mickle and Chris Kocher and
Grant Lindsley, Jack Hatchett.
Grant Lindsley. Yeah, so Jack Hatchett makes the short list. Jabron Meeser didn't end up trying out, but had an invite. Look, this team is stacked. They went to the final last year. They lost because they didn't take offense on the flip, arguably. And I think they're a little bit better. I mean, maybe they're a lot a bit better. I mean, they're upgrading their D-line pretty obviously with Babbitt and Antoine and Mike Drost. Mike Drost getting a little bit on the older side, but I still think he's going to be a useful rotation piece. Saul Rushmeyer Bailey could play off defense for them too. John Lithio, probably an O starting cutter for them. I mean, they have they have so many options. I think right now, for me, this is the number one team in the country. I don't even really care what I see from Raleigh. Unless they make some shock splash, I think that Ring is going to be a step behind Pony in my mind, particularly because they're coming off of the win. And we know what happens when teams win the men's division. They don't win the next year.
Yeah, it's a stacked roster. They retained basically all their best players. They add a little bit here and there, and they've continued to develop. I think this is also not bold, but I think you're going to see John Randolph continue to become a more assertive player, a bigger part of what Pony's doing. So that's going to take some of the weight off of some of the players who may be aging. Although every time I think Sean Keegan's going to fall off, the guy gets better. So, maybe he's going to have his best season yet. Same with Grant Lindsley. You're like, oh, maybe Grant's finally slowing down, goes out there and has a tremendous season. Goes on the D line. Like, I don't even know what to expect. Just nothing but goodness, I guess. It's been a very impressive. And so, we wait to see what Sakai, Machine,
who do they
Raleigh.
lose?
Yeah, no, basically nobody, right?
They lose Jack. They lose Jack Hatchett.
Oh,
they'll play with them for WCC.
Gotcha.
And they probably are going to be the favorites for WCC too. But they do lose Jack Hatchett, who's, was one. I mean, I think he was definitely their best defensive player last year. But you fill his role with Babbitt and Antoine. Okay. That's a trade you'll take. Obviously they'd love to have Jack too, but that's really the only player of real note that they lose. This could be a tough side. How about Fury, Keith? Well,
Fury's an interesting one. They lose some good players, but they add some good ones too. So it's a good trade. They only have a couple players for Worlds: Beth Kaler, Dina Elamelek, and Kayla Helton. So those are also their big losses, I would say. They lose some other good players. I mean, there's nobody on Fury who is not really, really damn good. So anybody they lose is going to be good. But they bring in Juliana Werfele, Michelle McGee, Khalees Cardenas, Ann Han Chen, and then Claire Toth is coming off an awesome season in the Western Ultimate League. So what is she going to bring to the table? This is more of the Fury reload, the things that and love about Fury. And then the vets who you've come to love on this team that also, like the Pony vets, just don't seem to ever age. Cree Howard's back. Anna Nazaroff's back. The same folks. They're still back. Nancy Sutton is still on the team. Serge is still around. You know what I mean? You're used to it. So they have it all. They have the young players who are getting better. They have the players in the prime of their career, your Jesse O'Connors. Now they have Jay Worf. And then they have veterans who've been there and done that. And Anna Thompson's still borderline World Games player. You know what I mean? Or Anna Nazaroff, excuse me. Obviously, Anna Thompson probably is too, but we have already gone on our tangents about Anna Thompson in the World Games. So Fury looks stacked. What's new?
What's new? Are they the number one team, Keith, heading into the season?
Well, we haven't seen Brute Squad's roster, but given that Claire Trope and Juliana Werfele have already appeared elsewhere, that's not necessarily a great sign for Brute Squad. So yeah, I think so. I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit about Molly Brown, who also looks pretty good, but I don't see a real way around Fury as your preseason number one.
Yeah, and we obviously saw Raleigh take them to the brink in the semifinals this past season. But it's hard for me to see Raleigh getting the number one status until they actually get the win.
And no Lindsay Sue.
That's right. Out with the ACL for the season. That's tough. That's very tough. She was huge for them in that game.
It's a player of the year.
But all season, but also specifically in that game, massive. So that's gonna be tough for them to deal with. But, I still think I'm very high on Raleigh long term. I just don't know that this is going to be their season. And so yeah, I mean, it's Fury until proven otherwise. That's the way I feel about it. Excited to have Scandal back, Keith.
Indeed.
And Sixers coming back too.
Yes. I mean, it's crazy to think how long it's been since we've seen Sixers. Claire Trope, the aforementioned, will be on that DC Scandal team and looks, I mean, I don't know about anybody else who watched the Team USA versus Team Canada Ultra Days film, but like, is the youngest person on the team the best player on the team? Like right now, I don't know. Claire Trump looked like the best player to be on the U.S. team in that scrimmage. So,
yeah. So just as a quick note there, Keith kind of just low key dropped that, but yes, we have footage from Team USA versus Team Canada. They played 2 games at Poultry Days, one in pool play, or I guess a showcase game. I'm not sure exactly. It's a party tournament, so I don't know what I don't know what the format is. And then they played again in the final, a rain shortened final. Canada got the win. So you can check that film out right now. Go to video.ultiworld.com, and you'll need to be a full or plus subscriber in order to catch that film. So we hope you check it out. It's a great little preview for the World Games coming up in just a few weeks. So Keith, yeah, any other rosters you want to talk about? I mean, I looked at the Sixers roster. I mean, they look like they're going to be really good. Losing Anushka Beaudry is not great, but I also count on them to have continued to do great development, and I still think they're going to be a really tough team. I can't pick them over Fury anytime soon, but I think that they are a team that could go to semifinals again at Nationals.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some interesting stuff there. Like I mentioned, the Molly Brown roster, they get Valeria Cardenas to join Manuela. They add Julia Schmaltz. It's been a little while since we've got to see Julia Schmaltz on the big stage, I feel like. But she of the 10 goal fame is probably going to be pretty productive, I'm thinking. We didn't talk about Machine. They add Abe Coffin to that core of Nate Goff and Pavlianis and Paul Arders. Joe White is back with them. They get Jordan Kerr. Jordan Kerr, anybody? It's pretty good, right?
Lineup. I like the lineup. I liked the lineup last year, and then they were horrible in pool play.
It's true. So there's some things to like about Machine. How about Amp? Henry Ng joining Amp.
Love it.
That's a little bit of spice. Like, I don't even know exactly who to make as the favorite with the shifting landscape in the mixed division. But why not Amp, right? I mean, they definitely have some losses. And last year was did not end the way that they would have liked, but there's some talent there, and I think they could be scary.
They're going to be a tough team. Who knows who's on mixtape?
Not Abby Hecko and Henry Fan, I think I heard.
I heard that too. So yeah, more to come. We'll talk more club season stuff as we get a little bit closer to the big tournaments. The first, sort of major tournament on the calendar is Pro Elite Challenge. It's the second weekend in July. And right now, looking like it's going to be pretty thin, except in the mixed division. Looks like there's not going to be a women's division as it stands right now. Only Molly Brown signed up for the tournament. So kind of similar to what we saw last year, but I think a lot of teams just not interested in traveling prior to WUCC. And remember that specifically in the women's division, like half the nationals field made the tournament. So we're not going to probably see much in the way of competition at that tournament or US Open, but Pro Championship's already looking very stacked at the end of the season. So kind of like last year, that's going to be the one to really keep your eye on as we get a sense of where teams stand. And there's lots of localized play and some kind of like round robin-y type events. We've got Eugene Summer Solstice coming up this weekend. So all of the top Northwest teams will be in action. And we're hoping to have some film from that tournament. So check that out if you're an Ultiworld subscriber. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, time to talk about 400 episodes of Deep Look. Stay with us. Welcome back to Deep Look as we welcome in former Deep Look host Wes Cronk, OG host with me back in 2012 and 2013. Wes, what's going on, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me, guys. 400. Jeez.
Yes, it's been a lot of time talking about Ultimate Frisbee. So I want to just take people back right now to the early years when I used to bike from my apartment in Brooklyn up to Wes's apartment, also in Brooklyn. He lived in Williamsburg, and I lived down in at the time I think I was living in Lefferts Gardens.
Yeah.
And pick up bacon, egg, and cheeses at the bodega, iced coffees at the bodega,
Yep.
and then, or sometimes hot, depending on the season. And then we would record the show in Wes's apartment. I don't even really remember what kind of microphone we were using or anything like that. But that's where Deep Look got started.
Yeah.
I've got to revisit my contract. You were getting bacon, egg, and cheeses from a bodega and an iced coffee. Like, what am I?
It was all self-funded.
You've been holding out on me.
Yeah, those were the days. I was thinking about that earlier, and how Ultiworld came to being by us locking ourselves in that apartment for 3 days, just
That's right.
banging on keys.
It's next month is 10 years, Wes, if you can believe it.
Well, today happens to be my 35th birthday, so I definitely can.
Today is your birthday?
It is.
Well, happy birthday. God, I didn't even realize.
Thank you,
I got to put it in my calendar.
Yeah,
It turns out that's the most important event of our show. I didn't even realize.
No, definitely not. But this did have the nice compounding effect of really driving home how old I was.
Well, so the early days, we were just in the apartment, and then I don't even really remember. Like at some point, we moved to an online recording. Keith and I started doing the show in 2013, and then we started doing a video show in, I don't know, it hasn't been that long, 2020 maybe.
Yeah,
2019, 2020.
Wes, I want to ask you, do you have any memories of early Deep Looks that we recorded, like whether the content or the reactions or anything like that?
You know what's funny? The thing that I remember most was the setup process. I don't really know what we talked about, but getting ourselves set up around that little coffee table and figuring out how to use the the technology at the time, whatever microphones we could find, and making it like just come together. And that was the fun part. I mean, that's how we handled everything back then.
That's true. It was kind of just figuring it out as we went along. And I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember we were talking about the AUDL, of course, was the big news at the time. And we had some like, what should the rules be episodes? And
yeah.
There hadn't really been a lot of podcasts about Ultimate to that point. I think there were a couple. I think Skyd Magazine had a couple, but this was the first time that there was a weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate.
Right.
Was this part of the roadmap? Was this part of the plan? I mean, the start of the podcast really does kind of coincide with the start of the site. Like tracing the podcast history in some ways kind of like runs parallel to the site's development. I mean, was this in the plans to the beginning, or was it just kind of like off the cuff? You're like, what if we just did a podcast too? What if we did a radio show? I'm sure Charlie said.
I mean, as I recall, the plan, we didn't know. Well, what I remember is we didn't have a plan. You had a story, and we needed a website.
That's right.
Because you had the story about the Constitution and the AUDL's ownership drama and all of that, and nowhere to post it.
There was enough of a plan that there was like, I had thought about trying to start an Ultimate website, and we had gotten that far. But that was the catalyst, as like having news to report on and doing the reporting, and then being like, well, if we're going to do it, now's the time. But I think the podcast probably just came as a natural extension later on, where it was like, that was kind of the early years of podcasting too.
Yeah,
I don't really remember when people started doing podcasts. I mean, it wasn't like it is today, where literally everybody has a podcast. But I think we knew that it was like, okay, well, like we should do this form of media as well.
Right. I mean, that's really what we were trying to do, was to follow the traditional sports media in the avenues of coverage that they were, following for the big sports.
Keith, you pulled the numbers. What are the most popular episodes of Deep Look of all time?
Oh, well, people like big tournament previews. So that is still remained, near the top of the list. So people, love Nationals previews, especially lately. I think over time the show has grown its audience. So, a lot of the stuff is going to be from the most recent seasons. So that to me is, there's not like necessarily like a like pattern that jumps out to me. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of just like more recent stuff and big tournament previews for nationals, because that's what people love. And to be honest, some of my favorite memories of the show are doing like our live nationals preview episodes, which, you know, are fun to record. But like, you know, our most popular episode, I think, at least based on like our rudimentary tracking, the statistics are fuzzy around this stuff. But like our 2020 college preview episode is probably our most popular recent episode, or like the nationals pools episode for club nationals, I think, where the Skip Sewell news broke. That was also a very popular episode. That one kind of bucks the trend, I would say.
Well, major controversy tends to bring listens. Yeah, I think, you know, I'm trying to think back to past episodes and like sort of what stands out. Certainly doing the live shows, that's always a lot of fun. We love to do those, and that's great energy. Keith, I'm trying to remember when we did one in person together a couple of years ago, before pandemic, I think. That was just great fun. Was that first San Diego Nationals, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the first San Diego Nationals. I remember like sitting, you know, in our Airbnb, and we like set up at the kitchen island to record. So like there's like people coming in and out, and we're doing our picks, and of course all the live shows run way too long. So we're like sitting there late at night, you know, talking about,
and we had an
Pony
live
and
audience
and Revolver. Yeah, I mean, it was
reporters,
a good time.
Videographers.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. It's nice to like engage with a broader group. You know, other stuff that sticks out to me, the picks. We've had a lot of pick competitions, and I think we've only lost one. Right, like we beat in the fields pretty much every year that we've gone against them. We've beaten Stall 7. We beat them last time that we did an AUDL picks contest too.
We got to bring that
for the
back
most part. Like,
year.
yes, we've had some misses. It's true. You can't do picks and not have misses. It's just the way that it is. But in the contest format, we've done pretty well. I mean, we used to do a weekly picks competition against the listeners.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
We would like
have a guest listener submit picks on behalf of the entire listener group, and we would compete against them.
That's when we were.
So we might have to revive that.
We might have to revive
for
that.
a
I like that idea.
season.
Club season revival.
Yeah, listeners, get your picks ready. you could be up. Yeah, well, maybe we'll have Wes do some picks. You want to be the first listener?
Yeah, you guys can keep your streak alive for sure.
Perfect.
So, yeah, and then like some of the stuff that I like talking about the most on the show, and you know, this started back in the early day, like very first couple episodes we did some of this, talking about like the meta of Ultimate, like what's the state of, you know, governance, or you know, we one of our most, I don't know if it was our most listened to episodes, Keith, but I don't think we've ever had more mail than when we talked about whether Ultimate was stagnant at the highest levels. And that was just a massive outpouring of email, because I think it probably, like, people have had that sensation. I mean, you know, now that's like kind of a different conversation, because the pandemic has made things so difficult for organizations, teams, and players up and down the board. And it's kind of like a chance to reset, but it's also just obviously a very difficult time. But I you know, that those kinds of conversations to me are energizing, and I think something that, you know, you can go online and you can read about people's takes on a game or what they think is going to happen in the game on Reddit or on Twitter or whatever, but there's not always that much conversation directed towards those kinds of things, and I think that's always enjoyable for me.
Wes, I mean, you've been, you know, we're obviously like in the muck, so to speak. We're in the trenches. But you know, maybe you have a more high level, a wider view of things. I mean, how much do you feel like the landscape has changed from what you could tell from, you know, when you started this 399 episodes ago to now? How big is the gap?
That's an interesting question. I I saw that the college championships were on ESPN recently, and tuned in for a little bit of that, and I see that as like a pretty direct extension from the start of Ultiworld to that type of coverage. It was on ESPN3, which I also took notice of because the trajectory that we were on for the first 5 years. I mean, I get the stagnant point because it seems to be just resting there on ESPN3. The pandemic, I can't even imagine how teams handled that. Right, like I was among the masses trying to pick up disc golf just to like fill the time, but it's not the same, and I just can't imagine what the disruption has been. But the sport is in, the best place it's been in since I started participating. So I'm sure that teams will get back to organizing, get back to the level that they were at. No problem. Because if anything, this sport is so much more athletic than it was 10 years ago.
It's obvious to see. I mean, Keith and I were just at high school national invite, and it's crazy to watch. Like the high school kids these days, you're like, wow, like, I feel like I'm watching mini club teams right now. Like the offenses and defenses have become much more sophisticated. The level of athlete, the level of throwing, like everything about the game, even from like 5 years ago, feels more advanced. And that's encouraging to me, particularly because of the pandemic, and because it's, that sets player development back a couple years in many cases. But no, like these top teams, they're really well coached. They're really well prepared. And we're seeing that trickle through. I thought the college championships this year were exciting. I mean, exciting is maybe the wrong word. There was a lot of high level play. There was a lot of beatdowns from better teams over worse teams. But overall, I think that certainly things have trended in the right direction over, the last 10 years in terms of the quality of the game. But in some ways, things have stayed the same, Wes. I mean, I don't know how much you're paying attention these days, but you think about when in 2012, was that the first or the second year? I think 2013 was the first year of Triple Crown Tour.
Oh, wow.
So we had Sarasota Nationals in 2012 that we attended.
Was that where we got trapped in Florida?
No, that was...
that was Hurricane Sandy, whenever that was.
That was in November. Why were we there?
We were there for Nationals, and then Hurricane Sandy hit
in February.
No. Hurricane Sandy hit the Northeast, and then we couldn't get flights back to New York.
I guess you're right.
So we had to stay with my parents.
That's right. No, that's definitely right, because I remember we spent Halloween there.
Yes.
And
October, yeah.
We were like not in New York, as it was horrible to be in New York, and we were in sunny Florida. That's 100% right. But then we had Triple Crown Tour, and like really that set the foundation for what the game looks like today. Like the club game, the tournaments are basically the same as they were in 2013. The structure of the season is more or less the same. Now there's been changes here and there, and some teams have changed here and there, but a lot of it is very similar to then. And it does feel like we're due for another overhaul a little bit. And certainly that's a topic we revisit frequently here on Deep Look.
That's interesting. What would that next overhaul be?
Oh,
like the professionalization was the next obvious step 10 years ago, right? And we had 2 leagues pop up. One survived, I think.
Yes.
Unless MLU is just trickling around, not being covered somewhere.
No, they're gone. They're gone. But now we have two women's leagues, and the AUDL is still around. Yeah, I mean that's obviously a big change. From the club side of things, Keith, I'm going to let you take that one.
To me, it feels like the big next frontiers are restructuring Club Ultimate. And this kind of goes hand in hand with like building a calendar and community that's a little more connected. So, we've kind of got the entities a little more established. Like we know the players in the game, so to speak. And now it's about building a structure that helps everybody. For so long it was competition. It was the AUDL versus the MLU versus USA Ultimate. And then it was, the AUDL versus the PUL. And there's all these different competing entities. And now I feel like people are kind of finding their niche. And it to me, the next frontier for like the bigger changes in Ultimate are going to come from figuring out how those things all work together with the other existing structures, with Youth Ultimate, with state-based organizations, all those kinds of things. Like, where does everybody fit together? Because that I think is the unifying force. It's either that or the sport just becomes like fours only, and everybody plays disc golf instead. Like it's one of those two.
Yeah, unification and like cooperation. Gosh,
it sounds so nice, doesn't it?
I cannot emphasize enough how important I think it is that we take that step as a sport.
So some things haven't changed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, look, everybody's still not voting in USAU elections and still complaining about everything. So some things are very much still the same as they ever were.
How about
it used to be RSD, now it's Twitter.
What are some classic moments, Keith?
Oh man, classic moments in the show's history. Let's see. How about some beef? How about Freaks of Nature? The
Freaks.
When they went to the US Open, the US Open was like desperately inviting anybody they could find to come. They were like way down the wait list. They were like, we're gonna invite Freaks, a team that had never been to nationals, like even was not even necessarily like the second or third best team in the region. And we're like, wow, they're just gonna get crushed. They're just gonna get crushed. And then they come out in like round 1 or round 2 or whatever and beat Chicago Machine. And we got chirped so hard, and it was so deserved. It's that to me is a great moment in show history.
Legendary upset, like along the lines of Phoenix over Buzz Bullets at Worlds many years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then how about Mallard? We had
our boys on Mallard. They almost hosted the show. All they had to do was win regionals and make nationals. They could have hosted the show. They were so close. I think people sometimes ask about like what's like our biggest disagreement or biggest debate, and I stand by. You and I had our most heated argument about whether it's okay to take timeouts to get to cap, whether it's okay to use your timeouts to burn clock to get to cap. And I was staunchly opposed, and you were in the camp of that it was a legit strategy. And I feel like you and I were like at each other's throats about it. We were like really getting heated about it.
We did have a very contentious episode. Wes, you want to weigh in on this topic real quick?
Well, I'll start by saying I didn't need clarification on which one of you was staunchly for it. I mean, I think that a step in the sport's evolution is people leveraging the rules to the fullest extent. That's how professional sports work. That's what's expected out of professional sports. So why would it not be expected here?
Yeah, and I will say, I think that the correct solution is what has happened, which is that we've moved towards more soft cap only games where running out the clock is not an option. Mm-hmm. And I want to see things continue to trend in that direction. We have the +1 soft cap now, with diff style, which already helps because it means that fewer games get to hard cap. You still need hard cap in some cases because of, just making sure the tournament runs on schedule during pool play. But, we're already seeing in semis and finals, it's been many years now that there's been no hard cap. And I think that that's the obvious solution. In fact, I think that more tournaments should be run without a hard cap whatsoever, and you just have a soft cap, because then take your timeouts whenever you want. It doesn't matter. You still got to score to win the game. And I think that that's the right way for that problem to basically go away.
I stand by it that at the time I likened it to faking injuries and stalling in soccer, and everybody, even though it's within the rules, everybody hates it.
You're going to get me going again.
but it's within the rules, and it's like wasting time just for the sake of wasting time.
But
and
faking an injury is like a you are.
But what?
you are-
Okay, so what if it? Yeah, but what if in soccer they're not really faking it? He's the guy just needs it really hurts.
Well, then,
he just needs a
okay.
second.
If the guy
you know?
gets kicked in the shin,
He
and
just
has
needs
to hang on. Then he has
an
to
extra
hang
3
on.
or 4 minutes to get up, and then once he's up, he's okay. He feels fine. You
It's
know,
a time
I don't know.
out.
That's
You're allowed. To use
that's what I
the
like in it
timeout.
too.
You can use the timeout whenever you want to use the timeout.
It's true. It's true. We don't have to rehash it, but feel free to give us your thoughts, General. I still need people to validate me.
At Deep Look Pod on Twitter, deeplook@oldworld.com.
You know, one of the things that inspired the most reaction that we ever did on the show. This is a pretty obscure episode. I want to say. I bet it's not near the top of our most popular. There's an episode where we just like drafted a bunch of things. We had Daniel Prentice on. Daniel Prentice.
Yes.
Friend of the show, a legendary reporter for Ulti World, and he has his own podcast, Drafted. He came on and we drafted a bunch of things, and we drafted like best gear, not sideline, best like equipment to have for
This was
Ultimate
depths of
accessories.
COVID, I'm pretty sure when we did this.
It is. But we got some really inspired reactions about the picks. I think we picked arm sleeve number one.
I think that was me.
And people were not having it. They were not having it. So there were some real reactions to the gear draft, which I think was a funny moment of 2020. I did like that 2020 gave us a chance to like look at some other, like, we did the best of the decade. And like we talked about our best players of the decade. I thought that was a lot of fun, both on the site and on the show. That was a good one. You know, the time I picked Sixers over Riot, it's always going to be a memory for me. Nobody believed that Sixers could be Riot, and they did. And they did. I'm so proud to have nailed one right. Any other memories that stick out to you? I can think of a couple guests that I've really enjoyed having on the show. In addition to our friend Wes here.
Gear draft. Hang on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get the gear draft.
You're gonna pull up the gear draft.
I'm gonna get the gear draft facts so that we have it. We also, what else did we draft? We drafted like a bunch of things, handlers, upsets, but it was non-jersey swag items. Did we write it down? Yes. Okay. I took arm sleeve.
Of course.
Prentice took Gator. You took Sun Hoodie. Then
scream.
I think we went snake draft. You then took fanny pack. That didn't age well.
Yeah, if fanny packs went out.
Prentice took knee brace, which, you know, there's a time and a place for that. I took black hole duffel. I feel like that's a great pick at that spot. I took 3/4 length tights.
That's a steal there.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Prentice took 5-panel.
Yeah,
hat,
that aged well.
and then you took ultimate cleats. I don't know why nobody took cleats. I mean, I guess it's not really swaggy. It's more like essential, but
Unless you have the Gaias, right?
that's what I'm saying. Guy is a relic now. I've had some Gaias.
I heard they were horribly heavy, and when they got wet, they were like impossible to run in.
They're definitely a very different shape from like, I feel like the more soccer style cleats that people wear now.
Yeah, guests. I'm trying to think of like most memorable guest moments.
I mean, I can't think of moments specifically, but I know like having, I've really enjoyed having Robin Wiseman on, Felicia Yang, I think has had some great interviews with us. When we had Julian Robinson on,
Yep.
I thought that was an extremely like thoughtful conversation on a really difficult topic that really made me think a lot. I really enjoyed having Julian on. Some of the most fun times have just been having the reporters on. You know, when Katie Reynolds used to come on the show, or Daniel Prentice, or Simon Pollock, Pat Stegemeller, like Lindsay Sue. We've had a lot of the folks who work on the site come on, and it's just fun hanging out, talking with them and getting their insight on stuff in the Ultimate community. It's Grant Gerhardt. That list is pretty long, but sometimes that's some of the most fun we have, is kind of just like talking Ultimate with our pals. Like that's part of what we like about doing this work.
It's true. Well, it's been a fun 400 episodes, and so Keith, do you think we can get to 800?
Oh man, do I have to commit to it right now?
I don't know. I don't know.
By that time, it might be Miles who's co-hosting the show. I might retire and you're co-hosting with Miles. I mean, Wes, could you possibly see that when you sat down for that first episode, y'all are going through your goofy setup, trying to figure it out? You're like, yeah, there's probably another 399 of these in the tank.
Oh boy. I mean, it was so early in podcasting. I didn't know that there would be podcasts still at this point. But I mean, I knew that we were on to something, just, with the big picture of the direction that Charlie wanted to move Ultimate Coverage in. So it makes perfect sense to me that this is still around. I still think that Deep Look is one of the greatest podcast titles of all time. And I'm excited to see you guys for 500.
We occasionally get tweets because the name Deep Look has something to do with like aquatic animals. So like sometimes we'll get tweets where somebody's trying to tweet at some sort of aquatic animal science person or content, and they'll like tweet at us about like deep sea shrimp or something like that. So Deep Look, somebody else is trying to move in on our space, but it's ours.
Hey, if you ever need more guests.
Well, since you're our guest right now, I think you should make your picks for the World Games. We'll keep it simple. So you got
hit me with the lineup.
Teams? Yeah, you got 8 teams this year. Okay, I gotta make sure I get them all. USA, Canada, Colombia, Japan, Australia, France, Germany, and the UK.
Nailed it.
Interesting. Well, the fact that you're even asking me for a pick makes it very different from 10 years ago. Because I think it was pretty much settled before they got there. I'll go with Canada.
I like it. They just upset the USA at Poultry Days.
Yeah,
I bet you didn't even know that, but
I did not. But my Montreal-based girlfriend in the other room would kill me if I picked someone else.
They're athletic. They got some springy players on that team.
Yeah, right, I remember 10 years ago, Goat and what was it? What was the monkey? What was the monkey?
Furious George.
Furious.
Yes. I mean, they were right up there with every American team 10 years ago, so it makes perfect sense to me that they just continued on that trajectory.
Yep. Both of those teams, maybe not quite what they once were, but the Sixers, the replacement for Capitals out of Toronto in the women's division, very strong.
Traffic and Caps were good then too.
Yep. All right.
It still is.
Well, thanks, Wes. Love having you on. Great to see you. And I hope to come
Happy birthday.
Palm Beach soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Come on down.
Will do. All right. Wes Cronk with us here on Deep Look. Thank you so much for 400 episodes, everybody. Let us know your favorite moments of the show. Shoot us an email, deeplook@ultiworld.com, or hit us up on Twitter @deeplookpod. For Keith Raynor and Wes Cronk, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.